React 19 is officially out, so let's check out what changes it brings. Now, probably a lot of you already interacted at least with some of those functionalities due to them being available in Canary version of React for quite some time. But now they're officially stable, so let's take a look. This release is all about optimization, allowing you to create better, more efficient applications while using less boilerplate code. Sadly, a big chunk of that optimization is not available yet. React compiler, which would allow us to basically forget about hooks like useMemo and useCallback, didn't make it into this release. It was supposed to be part of React 19, but there are still some rough edges, so while it is in beta, we still have to rely on those hooks. But let's take a look at things that got actually added. First, working with forms became so much easier. An official support for action attribute was added. Now you can pass functions to this attribute, which will be invoked on form submission. Both synchronous and asynchronous functions can be used, and there is also form data argument which allows you to easily access input values. In addition to that, forms can use server functions which can be used in React server components. This feature is already available for quite some time in Next.js, so most likely you already worked with it, but React 19 officially made it stable. If you are using React server components, you can add useServer directive at the top of a synchronous function which will mark it as server function. This directive can also be used at the top of the file to mark all exports. When server function is called from a client, it will make a network request to the server to execute the functionality defined inside of it. There are also a few new hooks. useFormStatus, which doesn't take any parameters and returns information of the last form submission. Important detail is that it should be called only from a component rendered inside form, not form itself. It can be used to easily check the pending status of the form to apply appropriate styling. Another new hook is called useActionState, and it's like the combination of everything we talked so far. It takes two parameters: function, which is supposed to modify the state and will be invoked when the form is submitted, and initial state. Just like form action, this function will have access to form data, but in addition to that, it will also have previous state as its first argument. After being called, this hook will return three values: current state, which during the first render will be equal to initial state, but after the form is submitted will be updated by the value returned from function we provided; form action, which is supposed to be passed to action attribute of the form; and isPending boolean, indicating whether the process is finished or not. Obviously, there are many different use cases how and where this hook can be used, so let's take a look at example from official website. There is an app with two items rendered as forms. Inside add-to-cart form component, we call useActionState hook and provide null as initial state, and add-to-cart function which is imported from actions.js. If we check it, we can see that it is server function which returns added to cart if the first item is selected. If any other item is picked, then after 2 seconds delay, error message is returned. After useActionState hook is invoked, we pass form action to action attribute and use isPending to show either loading message or an actual one. And if we click add to cart on both items, we can see that it works as expected. Another new hook is called useOptimistic. It is used to render the optimistic value while the asynchronous action is in progress. The typical example of that is any kind of messenger. Usually when you send the message, it appears right away, but next to it there is some kind of indicator showing whether the message is actually delivered or not. So we call this hook and provide two values. First one is the state, which will be shown initially and whenever action is no longer pending. In our case, it is the list of messages. Second one is the function which will be used to return the optimistic state. It has two parameters: current state and optimistic value. So in our case, optimistic state is the list of all current messages plus the message that was just sent. What we get in return from this hook is optimistic state and function called addOptimistic, which should be called whenever we initiate optimistic state update. And as you can see, while the message is being sent, it shows this sending message, but as soon as the action is finished, this piece of text disappears. Okay, so forms are finally covered. What else do we get in this release? There is new API called use, which lets you read the value of promises and context. It kind of looks like a hook because of its name, but it's not. And because it's not a hook, it can be used inside if statements. In case of promises, it integrates well with suspense boundary, which will render fallback until the promise is resolved. In terms of context, it works just like useContext hook, but again, since it is API and not a hook, it is more powerful because it can be used inside of if statement. Speaking of context, no need for .provider anymore. Okay, what else? forwardRef just got dumped. Ref can now be passed as a prop, which makes everyone's life easier. And also, ref callbacks can now return cleanup function, which will be invoked when the component unmounts. Another handy change that got added is support for document metadata. Now you can just add tags like title or meta and they will be automatically hoisted to the head section. Those are the most interesting new features of React 19. If you want to check the entire changelog, I will leave the link in the description. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, a comment and subscribe for more. Bye.